Chapter 42. This self introversion. Carisor, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Quote, it is a lie, this folly against self. End quote. Al, chapter 2, verse 22. The English is very un-English and the context hardly helpful, but the meaning is clear enough. The idea is to dismiss, curtly and rudely, the entire body of doctrine which insists on altruism as a condition of spiritual progress. Why do I jump in with this text without warning? Because at the end of my letter on Samasti, the dweller of the threshold popped up, and that brings us to the Black Brothers and the left hand path, all of which subjects are very generally supposed to depend for origin upon selfishness. This question is one of the most critical in the whole of magical theory, for in one sense it is certainly true that every error without exception is due to exacerbation of the ego. Yet the book of the law flings us at it disdainfully. Quote, it is a lie, this folly against self. End quote. How then? I fear there is nothing for it but to go thoroughly into the whole matter of the self. This may involve some recapitulation. Self is one of the trickiest words afloat. Skeet gives merely the equivalents, all practically the same in sound, in various Nordic languages. He doesn't say where it comes from or what it means. I don't know either, bless your heart. Latin and Greek don't help us at all. And when we try Eastern languages, it seems, very dimly, to give the idea of the ego, whatever that may be. Or perhaps that combination which is unified by ahamkara, the ego making faculty. Decidedly not illuminating. One can't use the word as an ordinary noun. Skeet doesn't even label it as such. One can hardly say, Mr. Blankensop's self is good, or rheumatic, or it's gone for a walk. It makes no sense. Yet philosophy has picked up this hapless tetragrammaton and made endless mud pies with it. When one says, I fell and hurt myself, it's only a conventional abbreviation. One means my nose or my elbow, as the case may be. No, I can't consciously admit it as a noun. More accurately would be, my body fell, and I am suffering from the injury thereby caused to my whatever it was. So what? Brahman don't confuse with the Brahma of the Trimurti, as so many nippies and clippies are but liable to do, is the macrocosmic negative absolute. When cross-examined, its microcosm is Purusha or Atma, very near our own Kabbalistic zero, not in no dimensions, equals infinity. Then comes Buddy, which curates bookmakers, clerks, miners, and privy counselors so often mistake for Buddha, the faculty of discrimination. Pretty much like the 0 equals 2 equation in our system. Next, the higher manas, which is our nishama, as near as a toucher, and the lower manas, which, as every lovely and cutie well knows, is our Rosh. The rest of the Hindu system can easily be fitted in. Note, however, that ahamkara, usually translated ego-making faculty, which collects what it can from this dump and labels it I. Well, then, what is this higher self that you roll out upon me? Actually, we are very far from being out of the woods. This Ut of Ugdafa, who looms so large in the Upanishads, the god peculiar to yourself, who appears in one of the darshanas, some individual constructed from the material listed above. Are these all one? If not, is the difference between them more than a quibble? Really, all these speculations are based on a priori considerations. We had better drop the whole argument as little better than a waste of time. Nay, as worse, for it encourages one in loose thinking, and especially in clinging to names which have no counterpart in things. There is only one point of theory which matters to our practice. We may readily concur that the Aeneas, the genius of Socrates, and the holy guardian angel of Abrimlin the mage are identical. But we cannot include this higher self, for the angel is an actual individual with his own universe, exactly as a man is, or, for the matter of that, a blue bottle. He is not a mere abstraction, a selection from, an exaltation of one's own favorite qualities, as the higher self seems to be. The trouble is, I think, that the Hindu passion for analysis makes them philosophize any limited being out of existence. This matter is of importance because it influences one's attitude to invocation. I can, for instance, work myself up to a divine consciousness in which I can understand and act as I cannot in my normal state. I become inspired. I feel and I express ideas of almost unlimited exaltation. But this is totally different from the knowledge and conversation of the holy guardian angel, which is the special aim of the Adeptus Minor. It is ruin to that work if one deceives oneself by mistaking one's own energized enthusiasm for external communication. The parallel on the physical plane is the difference between onanism and sexual intercourse. Probably, my reason for insistence on this point is my antipathy to introversion in any form. The mystic path itself is packed with dangers. Unless the strongest counter irritants are exhibited, the process is almost certain to become morbid. It is only one step from the invocation of Zeus or Apollo or Dionysus, which does demand identification of oneself with the object of one's worship, to a form of self worship which soon develops into a maniacal exacerbation of the ego. And if one persists in this involuted curve, one becomes a black brother or departs for the local loony bin. Invocations of even the most positive gods are dangerous, unless care can be taken to keep the personality of the god distinct from one's own. Athen is a superb deity, but one does not want to be nothing but Athen, except in that supreme moment of samadhi with her, which is the climax of the invocation. So, even in divine invocation, one should insist on definite communication of knowledge or whatnot, which is uncontestably not one's own. The fact that the self begotten feelings and ideas are so eminently satisfactory, naturally, since there is nobody to oppose them, is damnably seductive. Once started on that road, one can easily develop self deception to a fine art. One can imagine that one has undergone or achieved all sorts of experiences as described in the books, when all that one has actually done is to work the results of one's reading into a bubble inflated by imagination. It should be obvious to you that the habit grows on one. Every bad quality, from vanity to laziness, lends most willing aid. One replaces reality more and more continuously by these exciting and flattering reveries, which, by this time, have no longer any shadow of a claim to be called mystic experiences at all. Now, do remember this: it is the guarantee of wholesomeness in any invocation that there should be contact with another. It is better to conjure up the most obnoxious demons for the most noisome pit of hell than to take one's own excitations for divine benediction, if only because there was never a demon yet so atrocious as that same old ego. You will discover the truth of these remarks when you approach the frontier of the abyss. Well, now, if that isn't too funny, the text of this stupendous sermon was Al, chapter 2, verse 22. I take this verse in its most obvious and ordinary sense. For instance, the following sentence, quote, the exposure of innocence is a lie, end quote. For that means clearly enough hypocrisy. So, quote, it is a lie, this folly against self, end quote, only means, quote, to hell with sentimental altruism, with false modesty, with all those most insidious fiends, the sense of guilt, of shame. In a word, the inferiority complex or something very like it, end quote. The whole tenor of the book of the law is to this effect. The very test of worth is that one should be aware of it and not be afraid to sock the next man on the jaw if he disputes it. Love is the law. Love under will. Fraternally. P.S. But what do I mean when I say myself in normal speech? I mean Tefereth, the human self as determining the identity of the supreme triad, plus as much Rosh as I have succeeded in organizing as extensions of it. Though your supernal triad is in essence identical with mine, your Tefereth is quite definitely not mine. It is like mine in its nature and many of its sympathies, but your Rosh is altogether different from mine in, at a guess, 80% of its components. We must add Malkuth as the medium which crystallizes the characters of our respective selves. This is all horribly, hatefully difficult to put into words. There is bound to be misunderstanding, however cleverly I concoct the potion, but we understand pretty well for all that, at least so far as is necessary for most practical purposes.